Hey, so welcome everybody. So as you know, Maximo, which is now Manage, one of the components in the application suite, is a collection of many different applications. Now you as a user perhaps have never seen the very long list of modules and applications that make up Maximo, which is now called Manage. So what we're going to do in this series is we're going to walk through each of the modules in the context of different areas of management, such as asset management, work management, purchasing, things like that. And so each part that we're going to do here will cover one of those areas. And we're going to look at all the modules and then the applications in each of the modules that are related to those. So going to be rather lengthy videos. I'll put a lot of bookmarks in there so you can keep track of where you're at. And let's get started. So let's begin with some organization here. So during the series, we're going to cover all of the blue squares, certainly starting with asset management and work management. And then we'll work our way into inventory and purchasing, and then we'll wrap it up with analysis module and the administration module. So this particular part is going to be focused on the asset management square, and so we'll get going with that one. All right, so if you have access to the assets module and you open it up on the menu, you will see starting out a very long list of applications. So we'll just kind of go top to bottom here. So the main application obviously is assets. This is where you're going to manage your equipment records. This is where you'll see their locations, the work history, specifications if so configured. You're able to move assets around. You're able to associate assets with what they call rotating items. So the assets application is a key piece of your asset management approach. Asset templates, these are if you are creating assets records on a regular basis, you're able to pre-establish information such as spare parts and PM records and things like that, so that when you apply the template to a new asset record, a lot of the information is filled in. Locations application is just as important as the assets application. This is where you define where your assets are. This is the location hierarchy, if you will, that you establish. And when you're setting up Maximo, this is actually one of the first applications that you'll use and populate. There's a couple of applications I'm going to skip here because they're not used all that much. But I'm going to move on to meters and meter groups. So you're able to establish meters on your assets and locations so that you can capture things like pressure readings, run hours, cycles, things like that. And then those meter readings are able to be used for condition monitoring, which you'll see further down the list, as well as driving PM work orders when conditions reach a certain point or certain thresholds are met. Down to failure codes right there in the middle of the list. This is where you can establish your failure classifications, the problems, causes, and remedies that people in the field are able to fill in on the work orders as they encounter different things with the equipment for historical purposes and analysis purposes later on. Some systems come with a set of failure codes, but you can always add to or even build your own list if you'd like. This particular instance has the health, safety, and environmental add-on to it. So there's different flavors of the applications here for HSE. I'm going to skip those as well. All right, as you see further on down the list, you have Maximo Health and Predict. This particular system has health on it, so you can actually jump over into health from here if you'd like. Reliability Strategies is a rather new add-on to where you're able to use a library and look up different failure modes and the remedies and things like that, and actually develop your own custom reliability strategies and then track how effective they are over time. Keep an eye out for a thing called Role-Based Applications, RBA. This is the new set of applications that can be installed on a mobile device. They can also be run in a browser. And in the context of the Assets module, There's one called Asset Manager, where people can go out and verify information about the assets and do other things to it as well on a mobile device. The last one here on the list I'm going to talk about is the BIM Viewer. This is the Building Information Management. And if you have this so configured on the system, you can actually use 3D models of the equipment or even your building locations within Maximo. A little bit of configuration and such needs to be done to make that work, but this is how you manage the viewer to be able to see those 3D models. And that's the end of the Assets module. So the Preventative Maintenance module doesn't look like much on the surface, but it's actually one of the more powerful applications within Manage. This is where you establish what you are going to do to your assets and locations, at what frequency, specifically the tasks you're going to perform, perhaps the items that you need to perform those tasks, and then certainly the frequency at which you're going to do these things. So when a threshold is reached, whether it's time or whether it's a meter reading, then the PM module will generate a work order, which can then be assigned and planned and things like that. So it definitely is a generative element of Manage to make sure you always have the regular PM work orders being created in the system for management. The Master PM application is focused on items, and we'll talk more about items in the inventory part of this series. So a Master PM would be for items that are in storage, and then the PMs would then be applied to any asset records that get created from those item records. And that's kind of it on the PM module. So the next module is planning, and there's quite a bit here as well. So the very first app is Job Plans. And like I mentioned over on the PM module, the job plans are actually where you define the tasks that you're going to perform, who's going to do those tasks or who could do those tasks, the materials that you might use, any special tools that you might use, that sort of thing. So a job plan can be a very specific list of things that are needed to perform not only a PM task, but even corrective and other tasks that you perform by way of work orders. Job plans also have revision control, which is really helpful. The Routes application is where you can define an order in which somebody would either perform an inspection, perhaps perform a preventative maintenance activity. So you would outline ahead of time the path that they would take. They would go to building number 1, do their work, go to building number 2, that sort of thing. You can be very specific when it comes to assets and locations as far as the order that they are in by way of a route. Going to skip safety now, we're going to come back to that. The one called Datasheet Template. If you are doing calibrations on assets, then this is where you define what those calibration points and the functional tests and stuff that need to be done. Those templates are then filled out by way of a work order. Calibration used to be an add-on to Maximo, and now it is just another function within Manage. Skipping all those HSE applications that are there, we can kind of roll down and end up at the bottom there with the role-based applications, specifically inspection forms. And this is the application where you construct, draft, and then activate inspection forms, which can then be used by way of work orders, by way of a PM, as part of a route, that sort of thing. This is a very popular feature these days, is inspections within Manage. And that's it for planning. Now for the safety submodule, if you will, there's a number of things you can do there. So you can certainly use the hazards application to identify the hazards that either are present because of an asset or a location, or the environment presents a hazard. Further on down the list, you can identify precautions that workers need to take to address those hazards as they work in and around the assets. You're also able to define lockout tagout procedures as well as establish safety plans here as well. All of this safety information is then associated either with an asset, a location, or even on a work order. For the BIM module, there is a single application called BIM Projects. Within this application, this is where you establish the import of the BIM information from your 3D rendering system into Manage. You can establish locations and assets, and then you're also able to bring in the actual 3D images, which can then be displayed within the viewer within Manage as well. There's a fair amount of setup and configuration to make this work, but in the end you're able to see not only a 3D rendering of whatever you're working on, an asset or a building, but you're also able to see the work that is pending and has been completed within the model itself. And our last module, which is kind of an offshoot of the Assets module, is IT infrastructure. This is where you're able to define equipment and its relationship to other pieces of equipment. So for example, you could have a laptop of some kind and you have a certain type of hard drive in it, a certain type of operating system, and you're able to identify these configurations or collections so that you can manage the different pieces of equipment that might be involved. Again, it's kind of an offshoot of the Assets application, but has a more specific purpose for IT-related equipment. So there you have it. Nearly all of the applications in Manage that have something to do with asset management. Hopefully that was helpful, and we'll see you for the next part. Thank you.